Welcome to another episode of Trials and Triumphs. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Bradley Harper, or as he's known to friends and colleagues, Harper. Harper's passion for creating environments where people can thrive and grow stems from his deeply personal journey. From his humble beginnings on a small family farm to navigating the high-stakes arenas of finance and politics in Washington, D.C., Harper's path is a testament to resilience and self-discovery. In this episode, he shares his powerful story of overcoming the challenges of an upbringing marked by absent and emotionally immature parents, and how he's learned to recognize, understand, and align himself with the truth to build a life of purpose and impact. On today's show, we have Harper joining us today. Harper, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Doing great. How are you?
I am well rested, which is rarity. So, I'm excited.
Good. As a bit of background, Harper and I lived together in the Arlington, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. Mm-hmm. We met each other actually through church. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to him, and he's a phenomenal storyteller. And so I said, Harper, will you please join us today? And he readily agreed, which I was very grateful for.
I'm flattered.
It's good to have you. I guess just to jump in, Harper, tell us a little bit about your early life and background.
Early life and background. So I grew up in a farm, I guess both work. A little place called Albertson, North Carolina, out in the middle of nowhere. And very small town. Closest Walmart was like 35 minutes away, depending on who's driving. So I kind of think of my childhood as like a modern day, what is his name? Huckleberry Finn kind of thing. Uh-huh. Yeah, just not racist. If you ever go back and read those stories, they're so racist. They're bad. Yeah. So all of that other stuff. Yeah, I kind of grew up in the woods. Grew up working, and got two brothers, one older brother, one younger brother.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what is the age difference between you guys?
Yeah, so my older brother is 3 years older. 3 years and 2 days, actually. Yeah. So our birthday is just 2 days apart. So some years, my mom would say, like, hey, I don't really feel like making two cakes, so let's just have, let's do like a mashup birthday on the middle one. I'm like, that's lame, but okay. And then my younger brother is 5 years younger. Okay. Yeah.
But not near your actual birth date.
No.
In the month.
Well, I mean, he's only like a month away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is February. Yeah, February.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Way cool. So you grew up on a farm. Mm-hmm. I know this isn't one of the listed questions, but I'm curious, what were your parents doing that got you on a farm?
Well, I was born there, not in the barn. I was in a hospital. So the Harpers. So Harper is what I go by, but it's my last name, right? Yeah. I've gone by Harper since middle school. It's a boring story why, but yeah, that's it. The Harpers pretty much go all the way back, since they crossed the pond, from the British Isles. Yeah. Set up camp in Duplin County and been farmers ever since, pretty much.
Whoa.
So, yeah. My grandpa Harper, mm-hmm. he did the whole farming gig, but he was drafted in the war, but during boot camp, he was let go. He had something with his hip. But he ended up doing some kind of civilian program out there in Cherry Point. So he's still working on like military stuff, but as a civilian. Yeah. And he was an aircraft mechanic.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so my dad, he, as a young man in his 20s, he was looking around. A lot of other people were doing hog farming, pork industry,
okay, yeah.
Which is big in North Carolina. I think North Carolina is, I think it's like number 2 in the world region-wise for pork production. I think it's Iowa or Illinois or something.
I think
Iowa. Yeah, there's a lot of piggies. Yeah, and if you were wondering, yes, it does smell. Yeah, every time I go back home and I have that smell hit me again, I'm like, oh yeah, there's the Albertson cologne again. So yeah. Um, yeah. So yeah, my dad went in and he like made a deal with my grandpa, his dad, of course, and got out a loan and stuff and built the hog farm. They already had the land,
Yeah.
and yeah, went on from there. There's a lot of hog farms in Albertson. It's a big thing.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. Diving into our next question
Mhm.
then, what were some of the key moments that shaped you growing up?
Key moments that shaped me growing up. Um, I would say that one night when I realized I got my superpowers. No, I'm kidding.
I was like, what? This is new.
Yeah, no. No, this is my origin story. Bum,
Yeah.
bum, bum. No. In a world. Uh, let's see. Yeah, so growing up, I was little joke that I say about myself now is that I'm a very curious person
Yeah.
in both meanings of the word, which I think is accurate. But yeah, as a kid, I was incredibly curious. I'm infinitely curious, constantly adventurous, just because I just like learning stuff. It's so growing up on a farm, you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, which is like, oh my gosh, there's nothing here. But also, you can kind of do anything you want. So, uh, yeah, I loved a bunch of science stuff. I, as a teenager, dabbled in like all kinds of DIY, crafty things. Uh, the reason I'm bringing this up is because like that curiosity comes into play a little bit later. But I would say the biggest thing that um, impacted me growing up was my parents got divorced when I was about 8 or 9. Let's say 8.
Yeah.
I forget. It was like right on the cusp there. And yeah, so it came unexpected. I mean, you're 8 years old. How much can you expect anyway?
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
Wow. Okay, so I guess let's dive into the challenge
Yeah.
or the trial part here. What significant challenge or adversity have you faced in your life?
Yeah. I would have to say that, I mean, parents getting divorced, that's hard for anybody.
Yeah.
Um, but really, it highlighted that my parents themselves, aside from the divorce, um, were really quite absent parents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know they loved me, well, love me, they're still around,
Yeah.
and they still do love me.
Good.
Loved me, yeah. And I love them too. A bit disappointed at times, but, we're working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, they got divorced, and that was tragic in its own right. But fortunate thing is, when my mom had another place to stay, like got her own property and stuff, it was only about a half mile away from my dad's house,
Yeah.
just like right down the street. And ironically, it was right across the road, like you could walk 2 minutes front door to front door kind of thing here, from my grandma.
Okay.
Now, this is my dad's mom.
Okay.
So they got divorced. My mom moved across the street from my grandma. And yes, they got along much better than my dad got along with his own mother.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all kinds of fun. Yeah. So, and my parents had half custody. So pretty much every week we'd switch back and forth, me and my brothers,
Mm-hmm.
which, pros and cons. I mean, I get to have both parents in my life.
Yeah.
So that's great. And they're very close. So it's not like we have to do some big travel thing to go do that.
Yeah.
But I very quickly realized that we were ping pong balls between parents. Because also when the divorce was still fresh, oh, I'll say that again. So when the divorce was still fresh, they're still a bit bitter towards each other and stuff. And, I go to mom's house and she's all like, oh, your dad did this and he said this and he's like this and he's terrible. I'm like, wow, dad's awful. Dad sucks. This is the worst. And then next week I go over to dad's house and like, oh, your mom, she did this and she said this and she's like this and she's the worst, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh my gosh, mom's awful. Do that for about a year.
Yeah.
I think by the time I was about 10 years old, I realized that both of my parents were idiots. And I'm not saying that to be insulting.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because that is the most concise way to be descriptive of what was going on. And you were not supposed to be 10 years old in figuring that out. That's supposed to be like way later in life, if it happens. So I'm there. I'm 10 years old. This clicks in my little brain, And now, mind you, like, I'm a curious kid, right? So I was really trying to figure things out, which is why I stumbled across this quicker. And also the stories weren't adding up. So I'm like, somebody's lying. Something was going on here. So, I figured that out at 10 years old. And then quite shortly after, realized it's not just my parents, but it's most adults. Most adults don't know what in the world they're doing. And I'm 10. And I'm like, oh man, I need to figure out what I'm doing. And that really started a lot of things. It's kind of a unfortunate, fortunate thing. Because I was, what's the adversity? It's my parents are very absent parents, and I'll describe that in a moment. But me figuring out my parents don't know what they're doing and realizing like they don't really have the skills and the know-how to properly guide me. And I know I don't have it because I'm 10.
Dude.
And of course I couldn't articulate all of this at the time, but conceptually it was all there. I had to, put my head down and figure out like, all right, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to figure this out? Because nobody else is going to do it for me. If they do, it's not going to be right. So, so that really started things off. And so it allowed me to cope with my parents being more absent. Before we move on, any questions or something?
No, keep going, dude.
Okay.
This is
because
great.
I can just go. You let me start ranting. You invited me to talk, so I'll just go. We'll
keep
be here
going.
for 5 hours.
We love a good story.
Okay, cool. So I mean, I'm not going to go into scrupulous, tedious detail here. But like after divorce, my mom, she had to find work because she was a homemaker before and still, and so you had 3 rowdy country boys, up to nonsense all the time, quite often dangerous nonsense, and she had us half the time, and she had to figure out how to get a house and get a job and all this stuff, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, so opportunities are slim. It's rough. My dad had the farm, so he kept doing that. He always had his thing. So he had income. And of course, she had like child support and stuff from the divorce, but that doesn't pay all the bills.
No.
So, my mom's time was taken away. And then later, I think it was like 12, 13, something like that. My dad gets married again to this lady. And her name was Karen. And if you're wondering, yes, she was so much a Karen. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh no.
Dude, like when she entered the picture, it turned from like a modern day Huckleberry Finn to like gender bent modern Cinderella story. Yeah. Like her 2 kids, they didn't do the chores, we did the chores. And they didn't help on the farm, we helped on the farm. But they got all the little nice presents on birthdays and all that stuff. Oh yeah, she was all kinds of things. But it's okay. She exits the story later.
Okay.
So
spoiler alert.
We might not go into all that because it's not super pertinent. But I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Maybe
this question might help redirect.
Yeah.
So you've been talking to us about this challenge of your parents kind of not being in the picture, which is probably a struggle that a lot of our listeners can
Mhm.
relate to. For you, how did this challenge initially impact you? And
Mhm.
what were your immediate reactions? I guess you're probably pretty young at the time, but what do you
Mhm.
remember?
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that actually gets me back on track. What I was
Perfect.
thinking. Yeah, I bring up the stepmom because, uh, I mean, she was a gold digger. I'm just gonna put it out there. Okay, like that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's very obvious, from the get go, and definitely at the end. Um, and I know some people are like, "Oh, that's not a right term or anything." I was like, "Sure, not for everybody, but for her it is." Okay, I was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, And so like I grew up in like a single wide trailer um house, right? That my dad got and had on like the side of the farm. And that's where I grew up. And when he got married to Karen, um we were still in there.
Yeah.
So 5 kids, 2 adults
Oh
in
my
a single wide.
gosh.
Yeah. Uh Cozy is not the word I would use. I would say cramped and yeah. So, but before they got married, she was all like, "Oh, it's fine. I love you." Blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
2 months in, she's like, "You got to build a house." Um,
Yeah.
and she put so much pressure on him, and he ended up successfully actually doing his own truck driving gig. Like he acquired his own equipment and trucks and learned how to do it and learned how to
Whoa.
dispatch for himself. And for a while, he had a couple of employees to make a bunch extra money. And
Yeah.
then he's still doing the farm thing on the side, mind you.
Wow.
Yeah, busy. So my dad was in my life,
Yeah.
but he was always gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like having an absent father, but I still see him around,
Yeah.
which is weird.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think like my whole childhood and stuff. I was a mascot 2 years, like my eighth grade year and then my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
I think my dad came to one game one time in high
Oh.
school, and I think my mom came to one in eighth grade, the one time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Um, and I even went to like state level competitions for TSA. I made a CO2 car, kind of like a Pinewood Derby thing, but you put a CO2 cartridge in the back and you punch a hole in it and it shoots off like a rocket.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, the gasp and jaw drop there, that is the correct response. Yes, because it's freaking cool. I will nerd out all day on it. And I did really well. That was a different tragedy. I won't go down that one. I was erroneously disqualified, and that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
But I bring all this up because, despite coming from humble means, because I mean, you could probably tell from the single wide trailer, like we
Yeah.
we were poor.
Yeah.
uh, like, and especially after a divorce, like money gets all tight and everything. We were poor, and so parents are always working. And like when me and mostly me and my older brother, but a little bit my younger brother, we got off the bus from school and everything. Like we go to work.
Yeah.
Like we got to go help dad with the farm. We got to go walk the fence to make sure the cows don't get out. Like we're going to work.
Yeah.
Um, and so like we had to grow up so fast.
Mm.
Uh, and we dealt with it in our own ways. But it was difficult. Like when I realized the impact in the moment. Like I mean, it was hard. Things were just hard, but things were hard for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a team player. Like, okay, I'm not just gonna whine about myself here. But then I realized that no, this is wrong. Like there are
Mm.
things that I need here that I deserve.
Yeah.
It's not that, oh, look at me, I'm so entitled. It's no, there are essential things for human development
Yeah.
that we were lacking. Like even growing up, like we never did any play dates or anything with other kids or stuff. Like it took a long time for me to learn how to make friends because my parents are not sociable people and they're quite awkward socially.
That might track actually.
Yeah. Um, so I had to basically figure out everything of life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I didn't even have parents to go to for support, whether it was just emotional or like, hey, help me figure this out, because they didn't know
Yeah.
and they still don't. Um, So yeah, and then, when me and my brothers, my little brother, he has a really hard time with it even today. Um, like when we tried to talk to our parents about these struggles that we are still dealing with,
Yeah.
and that we are still overcoming, and that directly stem from their decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, the situation sucked for them too.
Yeah.
And I am not overlooking that. And I think it's somewhat common for people to do that. But things are really hard on them as well. That doesn't excuse everything,
Yeah.
but it does put things in a very important context. So I don't want to lose that. But even today, it's almost impossible to talk to them because even if we're not trying to assign blame, they don't have the emotional maturity to even talk about it properly. They get evasive, or they get quiet, they get cold, they change the topic,
Yeah.
yada yada yada, whatever thing. Because I imagine it's hard for them to admit to themselves, really what happened.
Yeah.
Because if I was in their shoes and I'm being reminded of everything that happened, and it's
Mm-hmm.
traumatizing to them as well. And you love your children, okay? Like they love
Yeah.
us, they love me, and they wanted to give us a better life. They didn't. Um, and
Oh man.
yeah, like that's a really hard thing to accept
Yeah.
and admit to yourself that you failed your children in virtually all the ways. I mean, they made sure we survived until adulthood, so they, fulfilled their their duties there.
Yeah.
Um, and we never went hungry. Uh, so there's that. A lot of canned food, but there's nothing wrong with canned food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I realized the impact of it pretty early on, and I did not handle it in the best way at all times. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, and a lot of, I mean, to a point, a bit of self-isolation, because I just needed a place to think without having somebody else interject some other thoughts. I needed a place to feel without someone
Yeah.
telling me how I should feel.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that's how I would describe the initial impact.
Yeah. So then tell me, were there any turning points or like pivotal moments along the way?
Yes. Um, there was one early one, and then I would say a bigger one later. I'll briefly mention the first one.
Yeah.
Um, and I forget exactly how old I was. I was like early teens-ish and stuff. So remember Karen, right?
Yes.
So she was mean, and not just to me.
Yeah.
I mean, she had it out for me because she would like say things that were just obvious lies, and I'm a kid, and I'm just like, "Hello, she is lying," and I did not have any tact in stating that whatsoever.
Yeah.
So therefore, I was, air quotes, disrespectful to authority and defiant towards authority. And in my opinion, you kind of lose your authority when you're being a dum-dum, okay? So, but, we disagree. But she was abusive to my dad. She would manipulate him left and right, and my dad, he's very smart when it comes to like how to manage things. Man, the guy has a knack for managing things,
Cool.
like business kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But beyond that, he's quite gullible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's good at heart and everything. He's a generous man. He's kind. If somebody really needs help, he will, step in if he can.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes he's a bit naive,
Yeah.
even to this day. And he's yeah, he just turned 60. Yeah, I keep an eye on the guy. But the pivotal thing was I realized how incredibly damaging and toxic Karen was really being to everyone. she was outright abusive to me and my little brother, in a lot of different ways. I won't go down that one. Mostly verbal stuff, like nothing like extreme that you call the cops for kind of thing. Nothing like that. But certainly enough to put some scars on someone mentally and emotionally. And my dad, I believe, was just so traumatized from going through divorce the first time, because he's a family man.
Yeah.
Okay, which is a bit ironic considering he was an absent father. But he does value that, and he did work to provide for his family. Wasn't the best in making sure it happened the right way, but the intentions were there, and they were acted on, and that is a noble thing. But I just realized, like, my dad was blinded by this illusion that Karen had forged around his mind, and there's no amount of negotiating or persuading or just trying to open his eyes to what she was doing and who she was, and how, like, there was real deep suffering both in him and his 3 boys because of her behavior.
Wow.
And he couldn't get it. And so and this is very early, like teen years and stuff, so they were married for a couple years. I realized I was the only one who really, saw it for what it was. Well, there was my mom, but she hated her anyway. I mean, go figure. She's on the other side. She's like, yeah, oh yeah, your stepmom, she's the worst. She's terrible. She was right with those. So I had to think. I went into, like, war mode.
Yeah.
And I, for really the first time, had to figure out how to get really, really strategic. And I had to evaluate the whole situation very deeply. And I came to the realization that the only point of persuasion, the only leverage I have with my dad, is that I know he loves me. And I know that he is suffering with this woman and everything. And so I realized I had to use that. I had to hurt my dad to help him.
Yeah.
And so I told him, I said, Dad, I will not live under the same roof as this woman. I won't do it. And he says, well, you have to have custody, blah, 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 blah. And I said, nope, I'm going to go live with at mom's house. And, like, if you keep backing her up on all these things, which I know are faults, stepmom, not mom.
Yeah.
Like, I can't have this in my life. And so I didn't talk to him for 2 years. Yeah. I said I was going to be brief with saying this one, but, here we are. Yeah, and I went to church every Sunday. And during this time, I sat 2 pews in front of him. By myself, usually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you'd still kind of see him, and there was still some overlap in the area, but you still wouldn't talk. Okay.
Yep. And after 2 years, and there was attempts to, like, here and there for him to try to get back and stuff. And, there's some talking then and such, but, for the most part, yeah, 2 years, not being there. And I remember very distinctly, there was this one Sunday where my dad comes up to me, and his entire countenance was different. There's this whole different air around him. And he approached me, and he said, is it okay if we talk? I said, yeah, sure. So we, like, went off into an empty room that was in the church building there, while other people went to Sunday school. And he went in there, and there's a long pause, and he was using every part of himself to choose the words that he was about to speak. And he started to tear up already without even saying anything. And he said, you're right. And now, I was a bit of a prick, so I was like, right about what? Okay. I mean, like, that's the truth. That's part of the story. Yeah. I can't make myself look like the hero here, like, well, all this stuff. I mean, yeah, I was right, but I was not graceful in it.
Yeah.
I learned that much later. uh, but he says, you're right. He says, the other day Karen was saying something, doing something, blah, blah. I forget the details of it now.
Yeah.
But my dad was discussing with her. He says, I want my son in my life. And essentially she was giving him an ultimatum of like, essentially, like, she gets to do whatever she wants with me and he just has to put up with it, or she makes his life a living hell. And, conceptually, she didn't say it like that, and he didn't tell it to me like that, but that was the idea that was communicated. And he said, and this is not the first time she'd done that. There'd been thousands of conversations they've had like that. And he was like, oh yeah, honey, yeah, sure, we need structure. It's all about structure. We need to keep family together. We need order, we need rules, structure. That's what they're all about. So were the Nazis, but that's a different thing. And my dad told me, he says, it was like the light bulb clicked on and he saw everything. He said he saw everything clearly. Everything that I've been saying, he saw it in a moment. And he decided that he was going to be divorcing her.
Yeah.
And he says, she should be gone out of the house in like a week or two. Do you want to come over for dinner? And I was crying, and I gave him a hug, and I said, yes, Dad, and it was, all that. So that was big, because I realized I can have a real positive effect on other people and in my own life by taking the right actions. And those are hard. And then the later thing, when I was 19, I served a mission for my church, went to Las Vegas, Nevada. They sent a little country boy out there to Sin City, teach people about Jesus. And yes, I did teach some strippers, and I think one was a prostitute for sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, people always ask, so I'll just throw that out there. But good people.
Yeah.
We are all children of God. He loves us all. And I learned a lot about family. And going to the capital of divorce, from what I had, I had valuable experience in understanding people as a child. I was 19, but I got it. I understood.
Yeah.
And I was able to really connect with people, both kids and adults, moms and dads and such, there, and all kinds of other people because of that. And to help them and to show them, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And, this is a podcast. I'm not here to preach, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm not doing that now, but, there were solutions in that for them that I had experienced myself, and I was able to provide access to that and show them, how.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved my mission. I love the people. I love everything about it. I don't love Las Vegas. I don't care for, it's a fine city to go visit. I would never live there ever again. God, no. But I came back, I learned so much about family, and I saw how beautiful and powerful family can really be.
Yeah.
And I think especially nowadays, just in society, we're really losing that. People don't really think about family anymore. It's all about individuals. And there's a lot of things that feed into that. How do you get to the next generation? It's through family, period, full stop. Yeah. There's no other way of doing it. And as an individual, I know that will be top priority for myself and, whatever family that I, create with, whatever beautiful woman is willing to put up with me.
Is lucky to put up with you.
Please tell her that. When you find her.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know where she is.
I guess help me understand how this experience has helped you with this abandonment with your parents.
The what with my?
Your abandonment of your parents.
The abandonment,
this challenge, yeah.
The experience, the mission specifically?
Yeah, you brought up the mission. I was trying to figure out where you're headed with that.
Yeah. Yeah, in my brain, there's not like I don't do time great in my brain, so information's kind of more in piles than in like a string of a story.
Got it.
Maybe other people find that interesting. I find it frustrating, but but here we are. Yes, so it was valuable because I had tools to bring back home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I see where you're going.
I had tools to bring back home. I had more knowledge. I had skills. I learned a lot more tact in how to be less of a prick. um, yeah. And really, like, I keep coming back to the skill set of persuasion. And there's a big difference between persuasion and coercion. And when you state it outright, side by side, you can kind of tell. But a lot of times, it's difficult to tell. And that's why earlier I reluctantly used the term leverage, because I don't like that.
Yeah.
Because, in my opinion, persuasion, there can be no force in that. It is an invitation, and it is sharing. That's what it is.
Yeah.
There can be no if this, then this, or else, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Can't do that. And it has to be, in my opinion, if you want it to be successful, attempted persuasion, you have to be doing it for the right reasons. And you have to know that. Like, you need the conviction behind it. And you also need the conviction to know when to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're in the circumstance that you're trying to influence, there's going to be your own emotions. You need to control that. And that doesn't mean being a robot and putting on a poker face.
Yeah.
I entirely disagree with that. There's this whole thing, the logic or the ethos, if you look at, kind of debate argument stuff in that way, and I think it's silly. We pretend like they're in completely different categories, and that is false. Anytime anyone's making a logical argument, there is emotion behind it, even if they aren't showing it. And it becomes clear when you see it in context. Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
So, and I say that because I come back and I learned how to, better manage myself emotionally. Right? I came back, I was 21 years old. And, learned how to be more tactful, learn some other things. I learned how to use my emotions properly.
Yes.
Which is a weird way of saying it, okay? But it's the best way I can think of it, because when you're feeling something, you can't just bottle it up and it disappears. Like, it's going to come out somewhere, somehow.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know, the thing that I think of is like back in earth science, like, back in elementary school, you learn about tectonic plates, and they start squeezing up against each other and they're rubbing, there's all this tension, and then they slip, and then that's the earthquake, right? If you keep trying to bottle it up or push it down or subdue it or ignore it, whatever, it will come out in some other way.
Yeah.
And probably not in a great way, and probably not in a way that you can easily manage or manage in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So recognizing your own emotions and using them in conversation appropriately is powerful. Because if you're hiding your information and you're trying to connect with somebody, you're hiding information.
Yeah.
You're hiding your emotions. You're hiding from them, but then you're pretending to say, like, hey, let's put all the cards on the table. You're lying to yourself and them just by hiding your emotion. But by being strategically transparent.
Yeah.
Like, if you're really angry at somebody and you're trying to, persuade them to stop doing something that's making you super angry, probably not the best idea to let them know exactly how angry you are and tell them every little angry thought that's in your head. Probably not the best idea.
Yeah.
But you don't need to hide that you're upset.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
I learned these things and was able to bring it back home. And I learned about family, bring it back home. And I remember I came back, and for the first time in memory, I when I was like saying bye to like my mom or dad or something, I would tell them that I love them.
Oh.
And I did that for a good 6-7 months, and then they started to do it back instead of my brothers.
Yeah.
And we never had that before. So yeah, things started to be better. I started helping my parents realize some things that they were doing that were not so great.
Yes.
There's been mixed responses on those, but I have very consciously helped both of my parents grow as individuals and teach them, which is a weird, because I'm their kid, right? It's a weird position to be in.
Yeah.
Like really, I mean, especially kind of these past 5 years and stuff. Well, really, since I was about 16, my dad, when he has something going on, he comes to me for advice, and especially nowadays. So really, like my relationship with my dad is more like he's kind of a big brother, which is weird, but it's just kind of what it is. But I know he's my dad. I respect him as my dad. So, yeah, I got tools, I brought it back, used them, good stuff.
Looking back, what are the biggest lessons you've learned from this experience?
Ooh. I mean, I think I've already mentioned a few, so I guess we'll just do like a recap. Number one, most people in the world, doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter man, woman, or whatever else you like to identify as, most people haven't a clue what they're doing.
Amen.
And most yeah, that's just
it's so true.
That is a fact. I do my best not to be one of those people, but sometimes I am.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
So I can fix it. Yeah. And also, in this one, I do not do. And I'll get into that in just a moment. But most people, because they don't know what they're doing, you don't want it to be obvious to other people that you haven't a clue what you're doing.
Absolutely.
That's not going to invite good things into your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people lie, and they do other things, and then they lie to themselves, and it gets all messy.
Yeah.
And they do it to assimilate. Most people in the world abandon truth and abandon reality to assimilate. And that's big.
That's
like you look a
deep.
lot of different like problems in the world, a lot of them stem from that. And so, big lessons. What have I learned? Truth matters. And it matters so much more than just like, oh, well, this is actually what really happened. Well, this is what the detective found or whatever. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's, in my mind, truth is synonymous with reality. Now, sometimes there are things in life that you're like, hey, something happened here, but we just don't know what it was.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there isn't truth. It just means that we don't know it.
Yeah.
Okay? And sometimes, with things like we can't figure it out, and that's really frustrating. So there's things out there like that. It's not like, oh, truth's just out there and you can just know all of it. Sometimes it's hiding. Because that's just the nature of the thing sometimes. But it is imperative that we remain honest people with ruthless integrity, conducting ourselves honestly with our fellow men.
Yeah.
Because when you begin to abandon truth and abandon reality, you start to create these cages in your own mind and in your own world. You start boxing yourself in.
Yeah.
And you start doing it in ways that you don't realize. And you wonder why so many people have so much anxiety and depression nowadays, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I mean, this adds to the pile.
Yeah.
But if you know the truth and you know what that is, then you can work with that. If you're just going off of lies, I mean, you can't get any traction. You're just, spinning around in the water, like, both oars are going the, an opposite way. You're just going around in a circle.
Yeah.
And, when you go watch the news and, you go listen to friends and family about things going on in the world or whatever's, and, it seems like we keep moving into the future, but a lot of things aren't really getting any better. It's because a lot of it's founded on lies. And it's, in my opinion, immature. Yeah. It's immature But people are terrified. People are terrified to realize who they are and to work with that, because you have to be incredibly vulnerable with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying, especially after years and decades of building that up. That's a scary thing, to really know who you are.
But also to feel those feelings you've been avoiding for so long.
Yeah. Like, I get it. Now, with me and, my life, and, we just talked about some big things in my life.
Yeah.
Even though I went through a lot of crap, okay, that was very hard and still impacts me today. I'm still working on stuff, right? I was fortunate to see all of that so early in life and to develop accordingly.
Yeah, you did.
So I'm sure I have in, some ways, through the years, like found like, oh, I'm kind of lying to myself about this. Like, I'm sure I have. I'm sure if I thought about it, I'd remember a few things.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like, I've been able to avoid that. And it wasn't because I planned to. It was really just because, that's the path I saw. But I didn't see it in context. It was all in hindsight that I really see it. So I get it. It's a scary thing. But I imagine if I was a person later in life, you've got your own personality, your whole thing, and, you're hearing these fanciful ideas that I'm sharing here, and you're wondering, like, hey, who am I really? It's gonna be scary. There's probably some dark stuff in there, buddy.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yeah.
And it's probably so refreshing to meet yourself, essentially. So anyways, big lessons. I would say, like, truth matters. Like, it changes your very nature depending on how you interact with it. And that is true in, your personal life, social life, any kind of relationship, friends, romantic, parents, whatever, definitely spiritually. Yeah. There's I'm not preaching this stuff, but in my faith, we read scriptures, we worship Jesus Christ, and we pray. We pray and we speak with God. And others, even within Christianity, and certainly like lots of other faiths, there are lots of different takes on prayer, what it is, how it works, etc. Right? In my faith and what I've personally experienced and what I have helped other people experience for themselves is that you can pray to God and He will answer. You got to learn how to hear that, and He speaks to everybody kind of differently. He provides answers in a whole bunch of different ways, and a lot of them seem very small, but when you learn to recognize it and you learn to feel it, you learn to feel the Spirit because it's there, you can realize, hey, He's communicating, and you can get better. It's a skill. You can learn how to do it, and you can do it by yourself. Okay, you don't need a bishop or a priest or somebody to do it for you. You can speak to God and He can answer you, and He loves you. So that was another thing too, which I guess big lessons, that's one of them. I had an absent father, but I have a Father in heaven. And I learned that, and I experienced it, and I continue to. And so that got me through a lot.
That's powerful.
It got me through so much. And like I said, I don't mean to be preachy, but that is one thing I want everyone on the planet to know that. Because, if you just try it out and you experience it for yourself, like, you've got a direct line. That's cool. So yeah, there's that.
I appreciate it. How do you define resilience, and how has your understanding of it evolved?
Ooh, that's a good one. The first word that comes to my mind is, I keep hearing it in a business context too, grit. Like, oh, you gotta have grit. You gotta just have that, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing. I would say, it's not just like, oh, I'm tough, I can handle hard things, look at me, I'm a tough guy. Or especially, and this one's dangerous. This one a lot of people do, and not just guys. You know, even though stereotypically in movies and stuff, the guy is like, oh, I don't care. You know, doesn't affect me. I don't care. Women do it too. Okay, it's a human thing, and it's called apathy, and it's a coping mechanism. And when used in this way, oftentimes it's dangerous. I remember I was being interviewed for a scholarship back in college, and it was for a leadership scholarship. And they asked me this question. It was something along the lines of, how do they say it? They said, when you're trying to lead a team or a group or something, what is one of the most difficult things to handle, to deal with? I did not have the questions ahead of time, so I'm here in front of a panel of people, and I'm like, I would really like to have the money and the scholarship. So I'm like, oh crap, I gotta come up with something. And I thought about it so long, to the point where it was a bit uncomfortable for them, because they're like, is he gonna talk now? But what came to my mind was apathy. Because when you become apathetic, there's nothing there to work with. Like, if you have somebody that's a little upset, or angry, or sad, or whatever on a team, they have a preference, they have an intention, they have something that is desired or not desired. There's a direction to work with there. Okay, you can approach somebody, but when someone just blocks themselves off, they just become apathetic. They don't care. That is not strength. That is not resilience. That is dissolving in yourself. And it is becoming less. It is diminishing yourself and your life experience. So that is not resilience. But what is resilience? I would say resilience is being smart about choosing your battles. You need to choose what you're going to fight for. Resilience is finding something worth living for and worth being about, and standing that ground tactfully and strategically. And you stick with it. You defend your ground, and you help other good people defend theirs. That's resilience. Because blows will come, and you stay. Like, it's gonna hurt sometimes, but it's worth it.
Overcome it to a point where you feel like you're triumphing.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to me ramble on. But there's some good stuff in there, I think.
Absolutely.
So, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us and listening to Harper's inspiring journey. His story reminds us that no matter where we start, we have the power to shape our own paths by seeking truth and commitment to personal growth. If you were moved by this episode, I encourage you to reflect on your own story and the truths that guide you. To stay connected with Trials and Triumphs and hear more stories like Harper's, please subscribe, leave a review, or follow us on social media. You can find all the details in our show notes. Until next time, remember, every trial brings its own triumph.